The church, you, me, and every follower of Jesus Christ, is supposed to be God's big welcome home to a lost and wounded humanity. To do that, to deal with the wound in ourselves and point the way to healing for others, we first have to receive and embody the spirit of humility, love, compassion, and justice of Jesus Christ. That should be our driving purpose as a church, because that's when we become a city on a hill with our lights on and our tables set for every weary and worried traveler in a broken world, just like Jesus said. But Jesus also told a story to warn us that being a good member of a religion or church doesn't automatically get us there. He said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" The man said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." This story haunts me because of how easy it was for the religious leaders to pass by the wounded man and leave him in his pain. It also haunted J.M. Darley and C.D. Batson. They were psychology researchers at Princeton, and they did an experiment in the early 70s to figure out why some people just walk past others in need and why some people stop to help. In the experiment, Darley and Batson recruited some seminary students who had dedicated their lives to studying the Bible. They had each of them prepare a talk, either a sermon about the Good Samaritan story we just read, or a talk about jobs for students at the seminary. They wanted to see if studying the Good Samaritan story had an effect on whether or not a student would stop to help someone in need. For Christians, that question hits kind of close to home. They were basically asking if all the work we do to learn and preach the stories in the Bible makes any difference in how people actually behave and respond to the situations around them. So the seminary students prepared their talks. After a few days, they were told to report to a certain building to fill out a questionnaire. While they were filling out the questionnaire, they were suddenly told that they had to go across campus to a different building to give their talk, today, right now. Some were told that they were already late and that they had to hurry over as fast as they could. Some were told they had just a few minutes to get there. Some were told that there was no rush, but that they should head over there anyway. And here's where the experiment starts. To get from the questionnaire building to the building where they would give their talks, each student had to go through a narrow alleyway. In the alley, Darley and Batson had placed an actor who pretended to be doubled over in severe stomach pain. This is the exact situation that Jesus described in his parable of the Good Samaritan. They wanted to see if the seminary students, people who had dedicated their lives to God, would stop to help the man with stomach pain. They also wanted to see if studying the story of the Good Samaritan all week would make those students more likely to stop and help than the students who studied something else. What did they find? In their words, what a student studied made no significant difference in the likelihood of their giving the victim help. It didn't matter who the student was, what kind of church he went to growing up, or what he had studied all week, even if it was actually the story of the Good Samaritan. Only one thing mattered. The students who had been given more time to get to the other building were more likely to stop and help. The more rushed the student felt, the less likely they were to even notice the man in pain. There's a basic lesson here, and it's kind of horrible. No matter what I say I believe, if I'm busy and self-absorbed, I will ignore you even if you're dying right in front of me. And if I'm dying in front of you, you will ignore me if you have a lot of things going on in your head. And even our religion that tells us that we're supposed to stop and help each other can actually be the thing that makes us busy, hurried, self-absorbed, and unlikely to help people when they're in need. Here's a list of things that Paul says we need to do to be the city on the hill, God's big welcome home to a wounded world. He says, let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good, love one another with mutual affection, outdo one another in showing honor, do not lag in zeal, be ardent in spirit, serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer, contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but associate with the humble. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it's possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. No, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. For by doing this, you will heap burning coals on their heads. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. The whole thing depends on compassion. Real concern for the well-being of others. That's the kind of community that I want to live in. That's how Jesus wants the world to see us, his followers. And the sad, simple truth revealed by this experiment is that being a little self-absorbed, a little busy, or in a bit of a hurry makes it all pretty much impossible for us to do, even when there's someone in pain right in front of us. But in Jesus' story, there is one man who stops to help the wounded man, the Samaritan, the racial and religious outcast. What was going on with him that made him stop? If everyone is busy and self-absorbed and in a hurry, how do we explain the people in our world who are actually able to slow down and show compassion when it counts? Did the Samaritan just have nowhere to be, or is there something deeper going on here? A few years ago, brain researchers Daniel Goleman and Richard Davidson worked on that question. They had some tools that Darley and Batson didn't have in the 70s. The ability to watch what happens in the brain in response to certain situations. For their experiments, they put people in MRI machines. They showed them pictures of people in pain, people with burns and other injuries, people screaming, people crying, people who were afraid. And as they showed their subjects these pictures, they scanned their brains to see what was happening as they looked at them. Some people couldn't handle seeing the suffering of others. They turned away or closed their eyes, but not because they were just cold-hearted. Their brains showed that they were actually feeling the fear and suffering of the people in the pictures in a way that made them suffer too. The problem was that it was too much, it was too real, and they had to look away. There were other people who didn't look away. Their brains showed that they were able to recognize the suffering of the people in the pictures, but they were also able to recognize that the suffering in the pictures was not actually happening to them. They kept their thoughts and feelings stable, still caring for the pain of others, but with enough detachment that they didn't have to look away from the picture. Their brains showed no fear or anger, but just empathy and a willingness to act. Based on their findings, Goleman and Davidson were able to identify 3 levels of compassion. At compassion level 1, I feel the pain of others, but I feel it selfishly. I feel like it's happening to me or like it will happen to me if I get too close to the suffering person. I avoid people who are suffering to protect myself. In other words, I'm a priest who sees a wounded man on the side of the road, but I cross to the other side so that I don't become unclean with his suffering and pain. At compassion level 2, I feel the pain of others, and I'm still worried that it will happen to me. But now I get angry about the system, the conditions that caused the suffering in the first place. I find people to blame and demand that things change. Someone should do something about the economy, racism, toxic masculinity, or healthcare. Look at all those people who are suffering. That could be me if we don't change things. At compassion level 2, I'm starting to realize that something needs to be done about the suffering that I see, but I believe that someone else fixing the system is the answer. I'm a Levite who sees a wounded man on the side of the road, so I hurry back to my synagogue to tell everyone that someone needs to do something to make the road to Jericho safer for all of us. I don't even see that what I did was leave the wounded man in his suffering, and I didn't see it because I'm so busy trying to fix what I see as the bigger problem. At compassion level 3, I understand that the suffering of others won't get on me if I get close to them. I also understand that I don't have the resources or the strength to make everything right so that no one ever has to go through this pain again. But I do know that I can do something about the suffering that's right in front of me. At compassion level 3, my heart is quiet and my mind is paying attention. I'm awake to reality and it's not all about me. I feel no fear or anger. I can actually see the suffering person right in front of me. I listen and learn what he needs. I use my own limited resources to help. I stop, I help as best as I can, and then I move on. At compassion level 3, no one sees my effort. I don't fix the system. I get no credit or recognition. I'm just a Samaritan and no one cares about me. But I end up being the only one who actually does anything to heal the world. Now, if you've ever suffered around Christians, you've met all three of these people. You've met the people who don't really want to know what you're going through, who don't listen. They want to quickly explain why God let this happen to you and what good is going to come out of it so that they can avoid the hard reality of your suffering for themselves. They have other things they're worried about and they just don't have time to get tangled up with your pain. And they experience a lot of anxiety when they're around you because your pain is all about them. You've met the people who are angry with God for letting you suffer, or with the devil, or with the world. They want to turn the whole thing into a philosophical debate about the system, about sin, about God's sovereignty, or whatever. They need to understand the big picture of what's happening so that they can feel like they have some control over it. And at some point in that process, they run right past you and what you're going through. But you've also met the people who show up, who listen to you, who cry with you, who pray with you, and who help you as best as they can. So here's a really simple question. Which one of those three people is the most Christ-like? Which one brings you the most comfort? Which one feels like God is actually there to welcome you home, to put his arm around you, even in your suffering? I think we can all agree that our world needs a lot less of level 1 and level 2 compassion and a lot more of compassion level 3. But here's the problem. I already know I'm supposed to follow Christ into compassion level 3. The New Testament makes it very clear that selfless love and compassion are the bread and butter of following Christ. But if I'm honest, I bounce between those levels all the time when I meet people who are suffering. Sometimes I don't listen. Sometimes I make the pain of others all about me. Sometimes I get lost in the big picture. Sometimes it's because I'm busy or in a hurry, but usually it's just because I'm plain old self-absorbed. But if we want to be God's city on a hill, if we want to be the kind of body that Paul describes, if we want to follow Jesus in spirit as disciples and as a church, we all know that we have to do better than that. We can't just know that we should be compassionate. We need to learn to act compassionately when it counts. The good news is that Goleman and Davidson found through their experiments that compassion is a skill that can be trained. The people at level 1 had no compassion training, so that's just how people are naturally out of the box. We feel the pain of others as our own pain, and we have to look away to protect ourselves. The people at level 2 were usually people with some religious training who understood the idea behind compassion and held it as an ideal, but they still got lost in the big picture. The people who were most level 3 compassionate, the ones who could look at the suffering of others without turning away, and the ones who were the most ready to act to help, those were the people who had spent years in disciplined prayer and meditation, intentionally developing their powers of compassion for the purpose of being compassionate when the situation came up. Their brains were different. Their response to the problems of other people was different. But the thing that surprised me the most, they were actually better equipped to deal with their own problems when they faced difficulty. And they generally felt more joy in their lives than people at level 1 and level 2. That's huge. It means that the path to joy in your life is not to care about yourself. It's actually to care about others. And if compassion is something that can be trained, it means that not only can we become more obedient to Jesus' command of compassion by practicing compassion a little bit each day, it means that that practice will actually make us more stable and more joyful in our own lives. almost like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, and self-control are fruit that grow from the tree of practicing the compassionate spirit of Christ. Since I learned that, I've been collecting old spiritual practices that help us train for compassion. And today, I'm going to teach one to you. To do this compassion discipline, you're going to need this bookmark. You can get it on my website, withjohnadams.com. This practice takes you through 9 prayers for your own well-being, the well-being of the people you like, and the well-being of people you don't like. I've been doing this exercise this week, and it's helped me follow what Jesus and Paul teach about praying for your enemies, and what John teaches about loving our brothers and sisters. I think the most amazing thing that it's helped me realize is that the cure for the people who I struggle with, the people that rub me the wrong way, isn't that they would be punished or humiliated. It's that they would be healed and brought into well-being, because the reason I struggle with them is because they're just not doing very well in their lives. Another thing this helps with is that sometimes we don't know how to pray for people because we don't actually know what they need. But these things that we're praying for here, they're things that all human beings need in order to flourish and become who they're meant to be. And so you might not know exactly how to fix the world and the situations that we're in right now, but I do know that if the Lord grants us these requests for the well-being of all people, the world can't help but be healed, because it'll be healed from the inside out. The instructions for this practice are on the bookmark, and they're pretty simple. First, you read one of the Bible passages that I listed on the back. There's 7 of them, so you've got one for each day of the week if you want. And then you fill in the he, she column and the they column. To do that, you pick a specific person that you like, one you love, one that doesn't cause you any strong feelings, and one who makes you suffer when you think of them. I like my friend Raymond, who usually cuts my hair, but I can't go see Raymond this week, and so my wife Belen, who I love, cut my hair. I feel neutral about a guy named Tim, who sold me a replacement blower motor for our AC unit this week, and I'm not going to tell you the real name of someone who makes me suffer, because I don't think that would be fair. We'll just call him Anthony, and he is super hard to be around. So I'll write all those in the he, she column, and then I'll do this for groups of people too. I like the people in Texas where I live. I love the youth group that I disciple. I feel neutral about Buddhists in general because I don't know very many of them. And I suffer when I think about Christians who don't act like Christ. Now that I've got my 2 lists, I'll pray each of these 9 prayers for myself and for all the people on my lists. And I'll try to mean each prayer with my heart. Here's how that would go with the first one. Lord, bring peace, joy, and lightness to my body and spirit. Lord, bring peace, joy, and lightness to Raymond in body and spirit. Lord, bring peace, joy, and lightness to my wife Belen in body and spirit. Lord, bring peace, joy, and lightness to Tim in body and spirit. Lord, bring peace, joy, and lightness to Anthony in body and spirit. Lord, bring peace, joy, and lightness to the people of Texas in body and spirit. Lord, bring peace, joy, and lightness to our youth group in body and spirit. Lord, bring peace, joy, and lightness to our Buddhist neighbors in body and spirit. Lord, bring peace, joy, and lightness to my brothers and sisters in Christ who are struggling in body and spirit. Now, there's 9 different prayers like that on the bookmark, and I'll pray through each one for myself and for each person on my list, and when I'm done, I'll finish with the Lord's Prayer. We all know that we need more people in our world with compassion level 3. We need a church that shines bright with the lights of compassion. We know we need to work on this. So I'm challenging anyone who hears this to do this practice with me every day this week. It's biblical, it's backed by science, it's good for you, and it can increase the joy and stability of your soul. So, church, let's stop talking about what we should do and who we should be. And let's do those things and be those people. How do we become a city on a hill, God's big welcome home to a lost and wounded world? How do we become the Samaritan who actually stops to help when people have need? We train for it until Christ is formed in us.